pleased this afternoon to be joined at the Lincolnite by Lord Chancellor and Secretary of State for Justice Chris Grayling and Lincoln's parliamentary candidate for the Conservative Party, Karl McCartney. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Yes, welcome to both of you. We've got the first question I will address to you, Chris. It's about reoffending in Lincolnshire. So the picture of reoffenders of Lincolnshire, according to latest government figures, shows that a reoffending rate in the city of 64%, so that's about 2 in 3 offenders. Is the current prison system working, and what's your stance on this issue?
So what you've probably got there is the number of people who've had short sentences. Those who've been to prison tend to be shorter, or tend to be less likely to reoffend. It's been the biggest problem, I think, in our criminal justice system. We have just introduced a major reform that I believe will change that. Up until the 1st of February, if you went to jail in this country for less than 12 months, you literally walked out of the prison gates, walked the streets with £46 in your pocket, no support, no guidance, nothing. And of course the people that you're talking about are often with the most difficult of backgrounds. They've failed at school, haven't got qualifications, haven't got a secure home. What we've now done is put in place a year's support, guidance and mentoring for every single person who comes out of prison in the future. I think that will make a real difference to reoffending, both here in Lincolnshire, where there's a good team of people are going to be delivering that, but across the country as a whole.
And Chris recently visited Lincoln Prison and saw for himself some of the opportunities for people as they leave.
And there's a good team at Lincoln Prison and a good partnership between the prison and the voluntary sector locally, which will help make a difference as well.
Okay, moving over to you, Karl. As you no doubt aware, well, you are aware, Lincoln was the first city in the UK to ban legal highs and alcohol in its city centre. Where do you think drug offences sit within your own priorities within the criminal justice system?
Well, drugs can ruin lives, both for the people obviously who are taking them, but also for the people, their loved ones, their families, whether they've got children themselves or they're in a relationship, or even for their parents. And so I'm very pleased what Lincoln City Council has done. I think they need to make it citywide, and I think those powers need to be looked at for obviously the same issue across the rest of the country. And I can do something about it.
Our manifesto contains a plan to do just this. I mean, the point about legal highs, it's a very soft-sounding name for something that's actually very unpleasant and very dangerous. These are artificial drugs manufactured in science laboratories, where if a particular formula is declared illegal, they move on and create a new formula. And nobody really understands when they take them what the effect is on them. We've got problems with them in the prison estate, where they've caused some prisoners to lash out violently. It's constant battle to stop drugs being smuggled into prisons. We've had to take a number of steps to crack down on these drugs. But in the community as well, I've talked to police officers who say somebody who's taken legal highs, it can take them 4 or 5 officers to hold them down. It's a real problem. It can do real damage to people's health. What's being started in Lincolnshire has to happen across the whole country.
And how big a problem is legal highs across the country? Obviously in Lincoln it's a really big problem, but how does that compare to the rest of the United Kingdom?
It varies depending on where you go. There are some areas where it's a significant problem, others less so. But they're present throughout our society, and it's an issue we have to address.
And less of a problem obviously in Lincoln now, the fact we don't have 2 shops that are selling them publicly and freely available to anybody who had the money to buy them.
Karl, this is one you're going to be familiar with. Back in 2012, there was a big question mark over Lincoln Prison, with proposals on the table to turn it into an immigration centre. After leaders campaigned against those plans, it was scrapped, but is there still sort of a view to restructure the prison?
Well, I'm going to take that on, if you don't mind jumping in front of you, Lord Chancellor, in the fact that we ran a very successful campaign, because actually the plans were either to close it, perhaps it turned into an immigration. That was another option. And obviously I didn't want to see the prison close in Lincoln for various reasons. Not only does the economic reason, but also obviously it employs an awful lot of my constituents. And I'm very pleased to say that we campaigned for a very successful campaign with the media and various people on the county council, and various businesses are involved, like Steve Gelder, and the work that he's done in the prison in teaching people skills, obviously for when they can use those when they leave, having served their term.
Karl made a very effective argument. This was something in the pipeline when I took over as Secretary of State for Justice. And I very much understand the geographical challenges that Lincolnshire faces of being a large county, a lot of rural areas, and not the best infrastructure in the country. And so we took a decision pretty quickly, and Karl was a very strong advocate that we shouldn't do this, that we needed to keep Lincoln Prison as it is, and I have absolutely no plans to make change in that respect.
Okay, so no plans to change Lincoln Prison
No
at
hidden
all?
plans for Lincoln Prison at all.
And
Lincoln
what
Prison, as
about...
far as I'm concerned, is going to carry on doing the job it's doing for the foreseeable future.
And one of the arguments was, obviously, if there wasn't a Lincoln Prison, there's obviously having sat as a magistrate, I know you can be waiting for prisoners to arrive for the court to then start sitting. But if there wasn't a Lincoln prison, then you'd argue, well, do you need to have a magistrates court? Do you then need to have a Crown Court? Therefore, would solicitors base themselves at Lincoln, or maybe the nearest conurbation, which might be Nottingham? And then you take the argument, well, why would the university have a law school? All those things could roll on from not having a prison in our city.
Okay. And what about those earlier proposals to bring an immigration centre to Lincoln? We already have one in Lincolnshire, but is that something that you're looking into?
Not on the cards at all.
Okay, let's move it on. It's one for both of you. Your party's manifesto says that you'll scrap the Human Rights Act and curtail the role of the European Court of Human Rights so that more foreign criminals can be more easily deported from Britain. Isn't it a bit too late now, with only sort of 15, 16 days to the election, to be trying to win back UKIP voters?
Well, this is something that's been actually a Conservative manifesto pledge now at 2 or possibly even 3 general elections. So this is not something that comes
Why
to
hasn't it
fresh.
been implemented then?
Well, because we haven't had a majority Conservative government, and whilst the public undoubtedly want to see change in this area, it is simply not right that people who intend to do harm to this country and its citizens can nonetheless preempt their human rights to avoid being deported. We would have done this years ago, but there hasn't been a majority Conservative government, and for reasons that completely escape me, both the Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party are implacably opposed to any change at all. I don't want to move away from the fundamental principles of human rights that we signed up to in the 1940s. Of course we should not do that. But we actually have to do something to protect the rights of our own citizens. And that's why the law needs to change.
And I'd just back up, obviously, Chris there. I'm sure he's had many frustrations being around the cabinet table and working with our coalition partners as ministers in various different departments in government. And I share those frustrations on the backbenches.
So how will a British Bill of Rights be different then?
Well, I think the key differences are, firstly, that it will not permit the European Court of Human Rights to make laws for this country without the consent of our Parliament. It will also give our Parliament, ultimately, a democratic override over what the courts do. And at the moment, the way our system works, if the courts reach a view about something, and Parliament disagrees, Parliament can change the law. In the area of human rights, Parliament doesn't have that power. So if something happens which Parliament and the British people fundamentally disagree with, but it's linked to the European Court of Human Rights, the European Convention of Human Rights, Parliament has no ability to change that. Our plans will give a democratic override, would have a balance of rights and responsibilities in law, so we'll make sure both are there, and we'll have a Supreme Court in London that ultimately takes decisions for us. We won't have a court in Strasbourg that has the final say.
Okay, to finish with then, you talk about sentencing, or sort of tougher sentencing in your manifesto, which I think most people in principle agree with. How can you achieve this though when prisons such as Lincoln Prison are so overcrowded?
Well, at the moment we've got about 2,500 spare prison places in the prison estate, and quite a lot of plans in development. We're constructing the biggest prison in North Wales at the moment, our biggest in the country in North Wales. But it's not necessarily about relentlessly growing the size of the prison population. It's about really identifying those areas where the public feel frustrated that sometimes sentences seem too light. One of the issues that we've said we will address in the new Parliament is whether the 14-year limit on sentences for causing death or serious injury by dangerous driving. In the most extreme cases, people are on the roads, been disqualified, driving at lunatic speeds, have taken away lives in dreadful circumstances. That's one of the areas where we said we'll look and say, is the maximum penalty for that enough?
Is there anything you'd like to add on that, Carl?
No, well, obviously, having sat as a magistrate, you do send some people to prison for things that they've done wrong. But actually, one of the things we want people in prison to experience is, the training of some skills that they can use when they then leave prison, so they don't reoffend. And I think all of us want to see prison as a deterrent. We actually want to see the rate of reoffending really decrease. And I think that's something that we're successfully tackling as a Conservative-led government, and certainly as a majority Conservative government is going to be at the fore.